When he turned his back from shoulder to shoulder, it looked like as wide as the tailgate of a truck.
And just darkness, literal darkness, just came like all over, just all over me except where I was standing.
This thing let out the most blood-curdling, mind-blowing, spine-tingling scream that you've ever heard in your life, and it cut through me like a knife.
And I knew that they were going to take me. I just knew it. And then the next thing I can remember is being levitated.
Well, when I look in there, I see two big eyes staring back at me.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Bump Podcast, a place for the believers of the unexplained, monsters, and paranormal. Join us, and we'll go face to face with what goes bump in the night. Hey there, believers. Let's hope that the internet holds up for this one. Okay, I've had a lot of problems lately. I know I say that a lot. I've tried calling other companies. They said they can't service my area. I tried Starlink. Thank you, Elon Musk, for what you're doing for the internet. But it's not serviceable here until at least 2023 sometime. So I'm stuck like Chuck right now. So we'll make the most of it. Hope this works. Today's episode is going to be a giant episode, literally giants. We're talking the Nephilim giants. We're talking about hopefully digging into some of this Smithsonian cover-up stuff. I'm bringing Travis on. He's been on shows like Blurry Creatures, the show that I plug all the time because I can't help myself. It's going to be great. It's one of my favorite topics on earth to talk about. So, as soon as he comes in, we're going to jump straight into it. I'm super excited. Oh, I've had a lot of feedback about the song that I play after the outro. It's a group, a bluegrass gospel band, and it's touching a lot of hearts. It touched my heart. To give you guys a little info on it, because I've had a lot of questions, a ton of emails. There's a preacher here. He's an old time preacher. His name is Ray Messer. He wrote the song. He comes from a small town. There's a bluegrass group from the same area. I don't know if they go to church together down there or what, because they came up for a revival that we had where I'm at. And that's where I got to hear them. But this bluegrass group covered Ray Messer's song. I don't even know the name of it. All I know is they were doing a great job. I decided, in church to record these guys singing a little bit, and the rest is history. It's not on Spotify unless it's on my show. It's not on anything. So it's just there. I'll try and make a copy for you guys to listen to exclusively for that, because I had a lot of people wanting just to hear just the song without having to go through the whole show. Okay, here comes Travis. We'll go ahead and get him on here right now.
Okay. Well, hey, I appreciate you having me on your podcast here. And a little bit about myself. My name's Travis Roy, and I have been studying the Giants for a while now, probably since around 2010, when I was studying mound building cultures of the ancient Celts, Scythians, and Sumerians. While I was studying that, I came across that there were giants buried in their mounds, not all the time, but some of the time. And so that got me, I did not expect to find them. And so that kind of got me looking into just strictly giants. And I bought some books, some reading material. There were some guys out there that had written some books. Fritz Zimmerman
Mhm.
was one of the first ones I came across. And I tell you what, he's done a lot of research up in Ohio Valley, kind of where he lives. And honestly, that's probably where a lot of the bigger giants were. At least some of the bigger mounds were
Right.
up there. Down here in the South, like Texas, there aren't as many big mounds that have been documented. But I personally believe a lot of them have not been discovered yet, or if they have been, they have not been admitted to their discovery by whoever, the powers that be. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit of an introductory of who I am and what I do.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Travis, I'm thrilled that you're on the show, man. I've been wanting to have you on forever. Yeah, you've already hit on a couple of things I wanted to talk about. One, Ohio Valley, West Virginia we used to be full of mounds. We still have several mounds in my area, about within 40, 50 miles of here.
Okay.
They said it was the Adena people. That's about as far as
Right.
they got with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, there's the mounds. We can get into that here in a minute too. And you said talk about maybe a possible cover up. It's like, are you talking like Smithsonian? Is that what we're looking at, or?
That's what I've heard. I try not to focus too much on them,
Right.
but it does seem to be, there does seem to be a cover up.
Okay.
I try to just focus on finding the accounts and putting them out there. But I mean, I've never seen a book or newspaper put out by the Smithsonian about, kind of telling people with excitement, what they've found.
Right.
So I've not come across that yet.
Right. That's a good
So
point.
are they covering it up? Maybe. I mean, it seems so. Like I've been to Smithsonian Institute in Washington D.C. and been to the museums. They don't have one filled with giants' bones and stuff like that. They may have some dinosaurs, but none of the humanoid, specimens.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you may be onto something there.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's just conspiracy theory, rumor, whatever you want to call it. That's
Right.
I've heard that a long time. That they had a hand in covering things up, and then there was it was like a Native American reclamation that they
Right.
were trying to give their
Yes.
the ancestral relics or whatever back, and that they kind of lumped in some of those giant skeletons with that, kind of like you have to take
I think. Yeah, you're on point there. And like, who were the Adena people, right? Like,
right. Yeah.
they try to lump them all in there. And I understand that like Cherokee people, they seem to come from a more distant background that possibly connects to like Phoenicia and the Middle East.
Yes.
But they don't really talk about that, in schools today in historical lessons. So I think you're right on there. They don't really talk about who these giants were. I mean, they don't even talk about the giants regardless.
At all. Yeah.
At all. But like, who were the Adena people? I guess that's what I'm getting to. Who were the Hopewell and all of these guys? So for sure, I do believe that they are a mixed group of peoples because of the different types of languages or inscriptions found in the differing areas. There's been Celtic Ogham discovered in Colorado, I believe, on the East Coast.
But we have there's two sites here within just 20 or 30 miles of me that has Ogham.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
And then up in, let's see, the Kessington Runestone up north, and I believe it's Minnesota.
Yep.
That's Viking, and there's also Viking Runestone in Heavener, Oklahoma. And then you have other inscriptions that they decipher as to be in a very old Hebrew and very old Celtiberian, and you also have Iberian, So you have a whole mix of languages that were here, and a lot of these are found in and around burial mounds.
Right.
So that kind of gives you a clue to who these people were. But they're not just Adena or Hopewell. I think that's just a name they kind of sticky noted to that and just kind of get everybody to stop talking about it.
Exactly. Yeah, they took a whole area, a whole culture, and just stamped, okay, Adena time period. These are
right.
The Mound Builders, they say. It's
right.
Like, that's
right.
Can't be more vague,
I know. Yeah, that's right. Because a lot of these people did have customs of building mounds, and you know what? If we really look into it, they could be distantly related to each other as they came and went different places around the earth. The Vikings had burial mounds. The Saxons had them. The Celts had them. So, and then you have them over here too. So I do believe that was a similar culture that spread around the earth. But what happened to the giants, among that culture? That's the question, right? Where'd they go?
Yeah.
Because there sure were a whole lot of them.
Yeah.
Based on my research, and I've have over 1,000 accounts now, and I'm still researching it, and finding new ones still.
Wow. That
So
is incredible. Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of some of the stuff that you find, and I know I'm bouncing all around here, man. I can't help it. I got 1,000 things going through my head about it.
That's okay.
A few days ago on Instagram, you posted something about a gigantic giant. It is enormous in Louisiana.
Okay. Yeah. Let me see if I can pull that one up.
Yeah, man. What was up with that? It was from the late 1800s, I think, wasn't it? 1890s.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me pull it right up here. Okay, Louisiana. Okay. Let me see if this is the one. This one's 15 to 20 skeletons over 7 feet tall, but you may be talking of another one.
Yeah, it was a post. I think it was 20 some feet.
Yeah.
It was I
have definitely found some like that. I've got one here in front of me from Texas that is, and I can read that one if you want me to.
Sure.
It's 18 feet.
Wow. Which
is a pretty big guy. Okay, this dates back to 1919. The Coco Nino Sun was the newspaper. Not sure if it's in existence anymore, but here it reads: Austin, Texas, June 14th. If the report that the fossilized skeleton of a giant 18 feet tall has been found near Seymour, Texas is true, it is the most important ethnological discovery ever made in the world, remarked Dr. J.E. Pierce, professor of anthropology of the University of Texas. It would break all previous records of giants by nearly 10 feet, as the tallest man known to anthropological research was only 8 feet 5 inches in height. The skeleton is in the possession of W.J. McKinney in Houston, Texas, oil prospector who found it, and has been seen by a number of people who vouch for the truth of the size of the relic of heretofore unknown race. Mr. McKinney, while making an excavation on the narrow watershed between the Brazos and Wichita rivers, came upon the fossilized skeleton near the surface. Mr. McKinney writes, I estimate that this man weighed from 2,000 to 2,500 pounds. According to my deductions, he lived about 2,800 years ago. The skull is 6 times the size of that of ordinary man. Mr. McKinney does not explain how he arrived to the figures as to the probable period of the existence of this remarkable man. It is probable that the bones of the giant will be donated to the Smithsonian Institution, which, under the direction of Dr. J. Walker Fawkes, is now conducting anthropological research work in Texas. So there you have it.
Yes.
18 feet tall.
Yes, and it was known. It was in this oil tycoon.
And
yeah, it was in their possession.
Right.
Wow.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. And they were going to send it to the Smithsonian. So that would be that's a big guy to be sending out to Washington, D.C.
Yep.
So how does that guy go missing, right?
Right. You think that would be front and center, that'd be,
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah, focal point.
Right.
Wow. Well, let me ask you then, you've got all this research done. What have you traced back, this giant lineage? How far back do you go? Where do you think the origins ultimately come from?
Okay. Yeah. Well, the origins, I believe, go all the way back to what we would call the Middle East.
Okay.
And Genesis 6 talks about it when, angels came down. Well, I mean, they have different names. Some people call them the Watchers.
Right.
The Bible calls them the sons of God.
Yep.
Which just translates into a godlike being that was created by God, but under God. They had dominions and principalities to rule over, but there were a number of them that rebelled. And I believe this is after the time of Satan. So they weren't fallen angels from Satan's domain. They were tempted by Satan, obviously, afterwards. And they came down and they took women, and somehow, it doesn't really get into that, but somehow they had children by them.
Right.
Which kind of blows my mind.
Right. Yeah.
And they created created this offspring of gigantic men and women, whatever they had. So sometimes we forget about that. Some of the giants were women.
Oh yeah, I guess we do.
Well, always focus on the guys, but yeah, they definitely had women giants,
right,
as well.
And it's the Nephilim, right? And they were
Nephilim,
around
correct.
Days of Noah and after.
Right.
The and after part
and
is what
afterward.
gets me. That gets me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I believe what that means, and this is just my personal research and how I read into the verse, is I believe they were afterward. And what I believe that means is they were after the flood. That happened again after the flood, because the whole context of before and after is talking about the flood during Noah's days.
Right.
So I believe that it happened before, and then God wiped them out, and it happened again. Now, I don't know if they were as large as they were after the flood, because there's this a whole other topic of how the atmosphere is different now than it was then. Lots of animals were larger back then, they say. So maybe the giants were larger back then. But we do know that they were pretty large after the flood, because of like the size of Og's bed. And God says that they were as tall as cedar trees,
right,
as strong as oak trees. So that kind of paints a picture of what kind of men and titans the Israelites were dealing with as they came into the promised land.
Yes.
So
I'm right there with you on all of that. I think Postoluvian Giants, absolutely, they come back. That there had to be Nephilim after the flood.
Right.
Going on a little more fringe, which I hope you don't mind if I do that.
Nope, not at all.
I had a past guest that said that she was frequently visited by a Sasquatch creature. Okay. They had telepathic communication, her and this creature. She said that this creature revealed to her a few things. Now, she reports that she is not well versed in any kind of biblical or theological anything.
Okay.
But this Bigfoot told her that it was an Eliud.
Interesting.
Yes. And she, of course, asked what that meant, and it said that it was a son of a Nephilim. So we're looking at 2 steps down from a Watcher.
Right. So, wow. That's incredible.
Blew my mind. Scared me to death, because she said that it was also telling her to read, these other texts, and that there, God, Yahweh was a false God, and there was really a female deity, and I was like, okay, you need to watch who you're talking to. You know what I mean? You gotta.
That's right. That's right. Because I mean, the devil's in there, and he's never going to tell you the truth.
Right.
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 Some of that may be true. Right. He may be an Eliud, which the first thing I thought when you said that was Elohim, which is another description of the sons of God.
Yes. Yes.
So that makes total sense,
It
which
does.
is really mind blowing, like you said.
Yeah. It rocked me, man. It did. And I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm in the camp with Heiser and stuff that says, when the flood hit, these Nephilim, they're still immortal. So they have these disembodied spirits, these demonic spirits that'll roam the earth until judgment.
Right.
So how can I say that these Eliud are not some of these spirits?
Yeah.
Doing the
Right.
telepathic speaking and stuff like that. I don't know, man.
Well, I mean, I say we just have to keep an open mind on that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. There's so much that we're not taught, and there's so much that's hidden. I think it's great to have an open mind, and I think it is interesting too that she has she wasn't real well versed or studied
Right.
into prophecy and just really facts of what
Right.
God's word says,
Right.
and that she was hearing this stuff from the individual, whatever the individual was,
Right.
a creature or whatever.
Yeah.
Was that was communicating that to her. As I think you have to keep an open mind with that stuff, because I don't disregard any of that ever.
Yeah, I don't either, man. And
Yeah.
a part of it, but she had moved, and she's still getting this communication. So
Really?
yes, something has
Interesting. I wonder-
stayed in contact.
Stayed in contact like a very long distance.
Pretty long distance. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that goes to show that there's a spirit side to that subject
Right.
alone, right?
Right.
The Sasquatch, and
Yeah. Or
I believe that there is.
or is it a full blown demon presenting itself as a Sasquatch, knowing that it could get her interest?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
it goes way
Could
out
be.
there, but
it does.
you have to, if you believe one thing, you have to believe it all.
Right,
what I mean?
right. Yeah, you can't sweep the weird, scary stuff under the rug.
Right.
It's all connected. It's all part of the picture.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. All right. Sorry to get us off on that little tangent there, but
Oh no, it's okay. Yeah, not at all. I mean, and you may be onto something there too, that there could be something to that part of it. It may be connected to the ancient giants. So I don't think it's really off on too much of a tangent. Possibly.
yeah. So do you think that
Yeah.
with these Nephilim giants, is that the same, or these later giants, the ones that are popping up in America, in these mounds and Lovelock caves and stuff, do you think that they are the same lineage, and how do they get over to here?
Okay.
Have you uncovered anything about that, like the travel?
I have not uncovered anything about travel. I assume that they use boats and ships because, I tend to disagree with like modern historians, is where they say, well, they had to come by a land bridge. Well, if you go to God's word, I mean, they were making bronze stuff way back then.
Yes.
They had chariots. They try to say that, there was a caveman period, and maybe there was, but I'm saying that pretty, close to, or not far from creation of men, they were working with metals.
Yep.
And they were building ships. Solomon, when he was king, he was sending ships, and they would go out for a year, and they would return, later, and they would bring all kinds of gold from Ophir, wherever that land is. They went to the land of Ophir. Some people say it could be here. Some people say maybe South America. I do know that in Michigan, there was a whole lot of mining for copper.
Yeah.
Around the Great Lakes. There were some giant beings up there, and they say that the copper from there ended up over into the British Isles, where they smelted it together with the tin from the Tin Isles, which is another ancient name for the British Isles. and they made bronze there. So who knows? Maybe the copper from the U.S., because it was pretty good copper,
Right.
made it all the way to the Middle East. So I think they were traveling back and forth for centuries. And of course, it doesn't fit the narrative that Christopher Columbus sailed in 1492,
Yeah.
right?
I think
So-
we're past that one by now. We got to be.
I know. I think everybody's caught on to that, hopefully by now.
Yeah, I hope.
So I really do think that they were seafarers. That's just what I believe.
Yeah.
We do know that, the Celtic peoples and the Viking peoples were seafarers. The ones that predated them, the Celtiberians, the Phoenicians, for sure, were sailing the seas, long ago.
Yeah.
Now, as far as, are they direct descended from the giants of the land, the Amorites and the Rephaim and all the different tribes there? I do think that they were. But I also do believe that they probably intermixed with other races.
Mhm.
And that's why you have the different languages and stuff like that. But I do believe that in a roundabout way that they did originate from the land over there. After the battles from Joshua fought a pretty big battle against them, and he killed a lot of, or actually God killed a lot of them with hailstones, massive hailstones, and not all of them were killed though. Some escaped to their fortified cities, and I'd imagine that they fled from there.
Right.
Got out of the land there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They had to scatter.
They scattered. Yep.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, so some of these ancient structures, like these megaliths, with these what looks like steps that are, 10, 15 foot tall steps, were those built by these giant races? I mean, is that where we're at?
That's what I tend to believe. Yeah, I tend to believe that they built, I think they did. Like all around the earth, you have all these megaliths, different types of megaliths.
Right.
Very rude looking ones, like standing stones, to very ornate walls, megalithic walls, like down in Peru.
Mhm.
Other places, actually all around the earth, really. You have them in Japan. So yeah, I do believe that they are responsible for erecting these. I do believe they probably had an ancient type of technology or knowledge that we don't have, and obviously they had the manpower to do it.
Yeah.
Like, did it take 10 of them? Did it take 20 of them? But if you got that many of them, and maybe they have other powers that we don't have. I know they had connections to spiritual realms too, probably. I mean, I know we do too, though. I don't want to disregard that. We have the best connection. But
Right.
when it comes to building all those structures and fortifications, high places, I like to call them high places. That's what God called them in the ancient text. He always got onto his people for not destroying the high places.
Right.
So I do believe that those are the megalithic structures and places of paganistic worship.
Yeah.
But yes, I do believe that they have connections to those structures, that they probably built them.
Okay. Because I never put that stuff together until in the last, I don't know, year, doing this show and talking to people, and I'm like, wait a minute, those do look like steps, and maybe something did walk up that,
Right.
because before I just, I took whatever I was fed from the History Channel or Discovery Channel, that for whatever reason people spent generations building these gigantic, statues and doorways and stairways.
Right.
It never made sense, man. But I believe it.
Yeah. For what reason? Yeah. And that's the thing. They feed us what they want us to know.
Right.
And honestly, we should believe them, right? Like, they shouldn't be lying to us, but we're finding out that they don't always tell us the whole truth.
Right. Now, I have my feelings as to why they would lie. I think once the lid's completely off of it and we realize, how special we are, that we wouldn't have to really follow along. You know what I mean?
Right.
But what do you think the purpose is, in your opinion, for them to have this mass cover up to try to just kind of come up with all these narratives and stuff? What's the point?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I can think of is it would prove God's word.
Right.
And so if the truth were to come out, even as bad or as ugly or as scary as it could be, it would prove God's word.
Yeah.
That's what I really think. I mean, you could say, well, it would disprove Darwinism. Well, it would totally do that, because, you start like this little ape and then you make it to, you might make it to 6 foot. Okay. Right. You find these gigantic beings in these mounds. Well, that'll shoot that right out of the, textbook.
Yeah.
So they can't say that because of this narrative that they're trying to teach in schools these, the past 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So I believe that's the number one reason, but I mean, maybe that's the number one, but really, I do think it's an attack against God, Yahweh,
Yeah, absolutely.
That's probably what it boils down to.
Yeah. Yeah.
To admit it would be to admit that he is God and he's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So,
yes, and they are not.
And they're not. Right. They are not. Even though they are trying their hardest to be, whether it's the elites of the earth or Satan and his dominion. Yeah. And I guess that kind of
they go in together.
Encompasses all of them.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Everybody who's sold out to him.
Yep, exactly. That.
Yeah.
There is a God.
I mean, that's my feeling.
Children of God. That's right.
Right.
I think you're exactly right. I just I kind of had a feeling you were going to say that, and I wanted to hear it.
Okay, there you go. Well, there it is.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay. I've asked a million questions here, Travis. Are there any certain accounts that have stood out to you over the years that you wanted to hit on, to discuss, that are like your personal faves?
Okay. Let me read one here.
Okay.
This is a very interesting one. Well, of course, I have a lot of favorite ones.
I bet.
I'll just throw out this really quick one. Okay. It's real simple. It's real short, and it doesn't give any sizes. But I'm thinking that it is probably. It's a report from the U.S., but it's reporting on findings in Europe, which kind of goes back to the Celtic peoples and the Stone Age in Europe, or it's not really Stone Age because they had bronze with them a lot. But this is a newspaper report from the United States in 1897. Simple title: Giants Remains, and it says the bones or tombs of more than 200 giants have been found in various parts of Europe. So that's incredible. Yeah. I mean, 200. So they've been like from all places of Europe. So that just kind of screams that they were all over the place and they're just not being talked about.
Right.
Now.
Yeah.
But in the 1800s, they weren't afraid to talk about it.
Right. And, that's the thing. People have giantism now. And, people like to throw off on that. Like, oh, that's okay. There's giants today. But it's not the same. Like,
no.
Look at like per capita, the ratio. These things were everywhere.
Right.
And we're not talking like a 7 foot tall basketball player. We're talking like 12 foot tall, 6 foot wide.
There you go. Yeah, they're proportionate. They're not like too tall for how wide they are.
Right.
And like a lot of these guys with gigantism, and I'm not hitting on anybody. I'm not trying to sound derogatory or anything.
Right.
A lot of them, they get so big, they have to walk with canes or something like that. And that's okay. Yeah. But these aren't the same individuals.
Right.
We're not talking about that. We're talking about men that are like, if you're 8 foot tall, you're 4 foot wide.
Yeah.
And you got this massive skull and you've got these thick bones. Maybe your skull might be an inch thick or more. And I found accounts like that.
Wow.
Where the skulls, and I'm not real sure how thick on average our skulls are.
Right.
I don't think they're an inch to inch and a half thick.
No.
I mean, I don't think it's anywhere close.
You know.
And yeah. So that's why they aren't the same. They're not just men or women with gigantism.
All right.
A lot of them have Nephilim type traits, and when I say a Nephilim trait, I'm referring to something abnormal.
Mm-hmm.
Like you would find accounts in the Bible where they found some giants and they had 6 toes and 6 fingers.
Yep.
Okay, so would be like a Nephilim trait. I don't think they always have those, but because it was something that wasn't supposed to happen, it kind of messed with the DNA, and odd things happened.
Yes.
Different anomalies. Probably one of the most interesting one that I came across earlier in the year was an account from 1899 from the St. Paul Globe in Ohio. It doesn't mention how tall he was. I don't think they found the whole skeleton, but they found the skull. And based on the skull, they could tell he was a giant. But I'll try to read this. It's a little blurry because it's an old paper. Springfield, let's see. When Men Had Horns was the title.
Yes.
Workmen unearthed skeleton of 2 prehistoric giants. Springfield, Ohio, December the 20th. While workmen were taking gravel out of a pit near Enon, they unearthed 2 skeletons of human beings. One of the skulls contained 4 horns, 2 on each side of the head. The horns are uniform in size and a little more than 2 inches long. They are located directly above and below the ears. Those above the ears turn upward and those below turn downward. There is a bad fracture on the right side, indicating this queer being was probably killed with something sharp, some sharp instrument, it is thought. From the size of the skull, that it belonged to the man who was a giant of some prehistoric race.
Wow.
So I tell you what, that was one of the weirdest ones I've come across.
Yes, sir. Now, what
and
would
I used
have
to
killed
come
that?
across them. What I know, yeah. Who killed that thing?
Yeah.
Oh, probably another giant.
Probably. Probably.
I mean, there are different tales of, these giants were killing each other off. There are like Native American lore from the north that goes over that. And I think there's some truth to those tales that they have, those oral traditions.
Oh, that's
definitely think there is some truth.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, that's one weird thing that I find is these weird things like horns. Sometimes they have a set of teeth below their lower teeth, like 2 rows of teeth.
Yes.
Which would probably be a nuisance. I'd probably get real tired of that if I had 2 sets of teeth down there.
Yeah, really.
So they had some weird stuff going on sometimes.
Yes, they did. Now, okay, I got one theory. That's a complete wacko theory to most people. I'm gonna hold that for a minute.
Okay.
Before we started recording, because you might hang up on me. I don't want you to. I don't want you to do that.
No.
Before we recorded, you said you had a couple of experiences yourself. Because I said, well, I usually talk to people that have encounters or experiences, and I'm so pumped to talk to a historian about this stuff. I could talk all night about it, but before I forget, would you want to jump into a couple of whatever experiences you've had?
Dude, I don't mind at all. Awesome. Yeah, I've had a lot because I go out hiking a lot, and some of my first experiences were my first experiences were like in 2014. So I've been having them since then. So off and on.
I'd love to hear it.
To different extents. Okay. Yeah.
Sweet.
All right. Well, so I know we did talk about possible experiences with, maybe a Sasquatch being in the forest. I have had a few, I guess what I would call encounters. Most of them, well, I know I've only had one for sure sighting. But a lot of the other ones, from my experience is they do not like for you to see them. And so I haven't seen a whole lot of them, but I have experiences where you'll hear, wood knocking in the forest, or maybe like a boulder dropping. And in Virginia, I was in the Blue Ridge Mountain region in Virginia. It was my first experience. And I was hiking with a buddy in 2014. And I believe it was August. So it was really thick. I mean, it was hot, and there was a lot of laurel, and I think it's laurel, just a lot of underbrush up on the mountain. So we were going up a logging trail, or a logging road, that they didn't use very often, but it was still there. And so we were hiking up that, and we had permission to be on this mountain. And it started to turn in a direction that he didn't want to go in. And of course I was with him. So he stepped off to the right, and we stepped off the trail, and maybe 10 or 15 feet. And we just kind of stood there. And then right in front of us, about maybe 30 feet, there's this deepest growl I'd ever heard. Well, I've never really heard a growl, but this thing was so deep, I can't mimic it. It was like if you took like 20 men and they with really deep voices and just made this deep growl, it just kind of shook you a little bit.
Yeah.
And we just froze. And it was right in front of us in this thicket. There was like maybe 6 foot tall underbrush, like just growing right there. So it was hiding right there. And I guess whatever it was, it saw us and was thinking we might just keep proceeding forward. And so it let out this warning growl. And so of course we didn't run, we froze. And we stood there long enough, and it growled again. And I could tell it meant like leave, like get out of there, leave the area. And so we did. But it kind of messed. I was following him, and he didn't go back to the logging trail. He just started going down the mountain, just right to the right through all this thick stuff. I was like, man, wait up. So it was kind of, it was scary.
Yeah,
it was scary, but we made it back to the vehicle. And of course that kind of like, it really shook me. I was like, what was that? The only thing that I could think of out there were bear, black bear. And I've even seen one out there before. I have family that lives in Virginia. So I used to go out once a year. So I did some research, and I figured out that black bear don't really growl. They make huff noises and stuff, but whatever that was huge. It had a huge chest cavity.
Wow.
And so I would go back like the following year, and I went back up there again, and I found some, an area up in there I wanted to hike around, and I ended up sitting there below a tree, up against a big tree, and I heard some wood tapping. I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And I was like, man, I might see something.
Yeah.
So I guess I should go back and say that I had a feeling that this might be a Sasquatch. And so I was thinking I was going to see one come out, because I heard that tapping, and then I heard some tapping to my left. I was like, okay.
Oh, wow.
I got my camera out, like I'm going to see this thing.
Yes.
Well, nothing ever showed. And so I got up and I started walking towards the one on my left where I heard the tapping. And when I did that, between me and where my vehicle was, it came these 3 loud knocks, like somebody took a baseball bat to a tree, like whack, whack, 3 times. And then, oddly enough, some birds were flying over, and they saw it. You know how birds will see something that they don't like, and they'll fuss at it? And so these birds started fussing at something in that direction. So it was over a ridge, just right below another ridge. But it was kind of in between me and the vehicle, but off to the side, if that makes sense. So like if I were back to where I came from, I would have to get closer to the area. So that really, it scared me. I was like, oh man, okay. My phone was starting to die because I'd have a horrible battery back then. And whenever I was trying to record, it would just drain it.
Of course.
I was like, okay, I better get back. I can't stay out here much longer.
Wow.
But I had a lot of things happen in that forest. Not really. I heard strange whistling, boulder dropping, like I heard like a huge boulder dropping up on the ridge, and nobody lives up there.
Yes.
So lots of odd things. But fast forward, I went back to Texas where I live, and I was one night, it was on a December night, around, say it was 7 at night. So by then it had been dark for almost 2 hours. And I was just driving down this road, this country road, and my eyes were fixed on an oncoming car. And as I was watching the headlights, because I'm real perturbed about drunk drivers.
Yeah.
So from a very young age, I would always watch the lights to see if they were swerving. Well, this huge humanoid figure darted from my right to the left in less than, a second. In 1 second, it had cleared the road.
Wow.
And it was like at a back angle. So I know what I saw because it went in between the two headlights. So it wasn't like just a shadow. It was a figure running with its arm straight to its side and at a slight back angle.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was really booking it. And the odd thing is I went back during the day and there's a really tall pipe fence in a field right there. So it was just running and it must have just stepped over the fence. He was going, he was so big, and he was big. Like in my mind, I wasn't ready to admit what I saw.
Right.
So in my mind, I'm thinking, I wrote down 7 foot tall because that's what my mind was ready to accept.
Right.
But I did make a mental note that its head was almost up to the tree line. But I didn't really think of how tall the tree line was. We don't have real tall trees out here. They're not like Virginia and West Virginia trees.
Right.
They're just shorter trees. And so the tree line was right close to 12 feet.
Wow.
So his head was just below that. So that thing is not 7 foot tall because his head is way up there.
Yeah.
And if you were only 7 foot tall, you weren't going to clear a fence that was almost 6 foot tall, not at that rate of speed because that fence was really close to the road. So that one really freaked me out because I was like, wait a minute, if there's something out here that big and it can move at such speeds, like how could you ever escape it if it was like after you?
Yeah.
And so that's why a great dread came over me right after I saw it. So that was my visual encounter.
My goodness, man. Yeah, I imagine dread would come over you because that's like there's nothing you can do about that. You know what I mean? I mean, thank Lord that you were in a safe environment at the time, because something that size, it could pull your car door off and you're done. That's it.
Oh, yeah, you're right about that. It could probably it might be able to launch my car if it wanted to.
Yeah.
And I went, like I said, I went back during the day. And so on both sides of the road, there's on one side, there's some really big trees and they've all been kind of squashed down. They're not growing like the typical tree of that species. They've been like something large would sit there and squash it down as it's watching the road.
Yeah.
And same thing on the other side. There was a smaller tree that was really squashed. So, and there was another thing I noticed was it was like a fence post, like just a regular little T-post. It had been bent to the right and then back to the left. So when you're looking on, not from the road, but from like if you were crossing the road, when you were coming onto it, you would see that it was twisted, almost like a marker. So I don't know what can twist. It wasn't like a tractor had hit it because the way it was bent not protruding into the field area or towards the road, but to where something coming onto it would see it. So I have a lot of evidence after going back in the daytime after my sighting at night to see, okay, this is a crossways here.
Right.
This is where something travels. So why did it run out in front of me? I don't know, but it did. And it was kind of cool that it did because it really opened my eyes to the fact that they are around.
Right.
Whatever they are. So,
whatever they are.
So that on top of my giant research.
Right. Yeah. And I love that.
Really, really interesting.
Yeah, man. And you being into giants, you are like an authority on giants. This giant runs past you and you're like, oh, that had to be 7 foot. Like it was so
right.
hard.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Even with all the exposure you've had to things beyond normal spans, it's that hard to grasp, man. I love that. It just speaks to the truth of it all.
Right.
Man, well, thank you for sharing that.
I wonder too, because I've heard so many accounts. Oh yeah, no problem. I've heard so many different people's encounters since then. Like I started listening into other stories, encounters, because it just really rocked my world after I had that experience. And so many people would say like, well, yeah, I think it was 8 foot tall or it was 7 foot tall. But I often wonder, is like, wait, is their mind playing the same trick my mind tried to play on me? Yeah. Were they much, or possibly were they just young ones? You can't write that off. And even with the giant beings that I find, I come across a lot of skeletons that were 7 foot tall, right. And that's not massively tall, but we have to remember that they are really wide too, and their bones are very thick. They'll say their teeth were like horses' teeth, right?
Right.
And their bones are just way thicker. So to that same point, maybe it is the fact that they were young warriors. Maybe they were only 20,
right?
Or maybe they were not fully grown yet. They might have been 18-year-old or something like that.
That's a good point.
And not quite reached their potential height.
Right.
We can't ever write that off. I have a lot of people say, well, that 7 foot's not a giant. I was like, well, I'll just point out nicely. It's like, well, how do we know how old they are? We don't know how old they are. They may not be fully grown yet. Because, people will say stuff, when I post a report, that's okay. It's good. I like it when people have something to say or put some input out there.
And
I think it's great.
There's a skeptic in every crowd, well, there's more than one usually, but even at that, at 7 foot, what was the average height of man then? Like 5'2", 5'3", 5'4", 7. That's 2 feet taller than average.
Yeah.
That's like a third, third taller. That's huge. That is a giant.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Yeah, it is really. I mean, every once in a while, I'll get around a guy that's 7 foot something, and I feel like I'm a kid. I feel like an infant,
right,
around him. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And just put some extra width on him and some bone mass,
right?
And some extreme agility and the ability to like up and run super fast. I mean, that'll just boggle your mind right there.
Yeah, like I got a taste of that, and I know it sounds goofy, but. I when I was younger, I used to get into WWE stuff. I went to a couple of wrestling matches. They come down into. I actually lived in Shreveport, Louisiana for 6 years, and WWE come in, and I was like, man, these guys were massive. I'm like, at the time I was in the Air Force, so I'm like 6'2", 225. I thought I was in good shape, and then these guys come out, and they're like, they smoke me, man, as far as size go, So I could imagine seeing something 10 foot tall.
Yeah.
That would blow my mind.
Man. Yeah, because I'm 6'2" as well. And then I felt tiny with that road crossing. That just really scared me.
Yeah.
I guess scared would be the right word. I mean, I kept driving. I did have terrors every once in a while when I drive down that road. I'm like, oh man, is it going to jump out? Because it weirded me out that it ran in front of me.
Right.
Not super close to me, but with the light from the other car, it really helped me see the whole thing.
Right.
I didn't get to see how wide its shoulders were because of the angle, but yeah, man, I tell you what, it did do a number on my psyche there for a little bit.
I imagine so. Did you get any details? I didn't even think to ask that. I was just blown away you got to see one. Was the hair a certain color, certain length? Were you able to pick all that stuff out?
Oh no, I couldn't see. Right, no, not at all. Okay, the details that I got were it's basically a silhouette. So it's been dark for a couple hours. The light's hitting it, and I'm hitting it with the light too. Yeah. And if I say one Mississippi, I mean it had cleared the road. And the road, country roads, you have enough room for a couple cars to pass, but there's there aren't any shoulders or anything, no stripe lines.
Right.
Just regular country road. Yeah. But still, I'm not sure how wide that road is. I didn't step it off, but it crossed it in one second flat.
Wow.
And so the details I have are the head looked small, but yet again, it was way up there, close to 12 feet. So I don't know. I don't really think it was small. It looked skinny and tall. And I've heard people say in the South they look skinny.
Yeah.
I haven't had a facial encounter yet,
Okay.
face to face. That was the extent of my visual was that experience. So
That's plenty.
it looked kind of long and slender, really, but I didn't see the width of it, and it just had like a round head. It was running at like a back 15-degree angle, probably because it cleared the fence. And its arms were straight to its side, I believe, probably to conceal itself to the most possible extent.
Yeah.
But like if you run with your arms out, you're going to show more of your body. So I think it tried to be as flat and as possible as it darted across the road. I mean, it's kind of humorous, really, but it was huge.
Oh man.
I didn't see flowing hair. I didn't see anything like that.
Right.
Which is odd because I've heard tales of that. It seemed to be short haired on the head, but I didn't notice any flowing hair.
Yeah. That's all
It
right.
was just like a tall silhouette of a humanoid figure, but overly big. You know?
Massive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. See, I would love to have that kind of sighting. I haven't had any kind of visual sighting of a Sasquatch.
Yeah.
I've had some weird stuff, but nothing. I want
Right.
that, but I want that
Yeah.
in the way you had it. Yeah, I'd like to just
Right,
drive
yeah.
by, see one out the side of the road, wave and keep
Ooh,
going.
yeah.
I don't want to.
Right. That's probably one of the ways to see it.
Yeah, man.
Is when you're in your vehicle, maybe, and you might be able to drive away from it, maybe.
Maybe.
Oh man.
Okay, I have, and I'm sorry that this whole thing has been like I have ADHD or something. Like I'm bouncing around everywhere, but
Oh, it's okay.
I want to kick back to something that we said early on, talking about
Okay.
the Nephilim. Okay, but this is something I've been kicking around, and I'm starting to settle on this, and I want to see what you thought. Do you think there's a connection between these Nephilim, these giants that were messing with the DNA, trying to corrupt God's plan, the human bloodlines, the Adamic bloodline, and aliens of today? And I ask that because there's these abduction stories that the Freedom of Information Act, they have to come out with. They're releasing this information saying that there are alien abductions, there are unexpected pregnancies, and it just seems to fall in line with the Nephilim agenda to corrupt bloodlines. And there's these celestial beings. We can't say what they are. They look like lights. So do angels and demons. You got these celestial things flying around. Do you feel like there's a connection between the Nephilim and aliens? Is all of that tied in together too, or is that something you haven't really looked into?
Well, no, I've thought about it some. I definitely have thought about it. I've given it quite a bit of thought. I used to write aliens off for the longest time, but the more I've heard about them, and I've always put it into a category in my own mind that if there were aliens and spacecraft, that they could be some of the very beings that came down, or like beings that came down originally to like Mount Hermon and took the women. Right. I've always thought that if they were trying to, kind of like a dude might try to impress a girl with his sports car or something like that, right? So I would see how they would try to make some sort of craft to where they could come down and really wow them and take, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To impress them and kind of win the heart, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you were onto something there. That's kind of what I think. Now, are the aliens of today, are they the same? I think they're probably similar.
Yeah.
I do think they're spiritual beings. I think that they're probably like some sort of demonic or satanic beings.
That's what I'm afraid of too.
I don't write that off at all.
Right.
And yes, I guess I would have to say that it probably is kind of connected to the same Nephilim topic.
Right.
I think it would have to be
Yeah. I mean, there's so many
very
connections, you know,
similar.
like you said, showing off the vehicles, you know, showing off the sacred sciences, you know, like look what we can create, you know, look what we
Right.
can do. And yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a whole lot of way wilder conspiracy theories out there that even those kind of tie into it all.
Yeah.
But I see more parallels as time goes on between
Yeah.
kind of demonic force and even like the description of UFOs versus the description of some of these angels, you know, wheels within wheels or covered with eyes, you know,
Yeah.
that could easily describe a spacecraft covered in lights, you know, spinning and stuff like that. It's what we perceive now would be perceived a little different then, you know. It's what we are exposed to versus what they were exposed to. They were exposed to something more directly, you know. They see these celestial beings, we see it, and we have to rush it off of some kind of scientific thing, you know, some kind of man-made craft, because our mind doesn't go to the spiritual as quickly or as readily. So I don't know, man. I figured I would ask what your opinion was.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's a good question. I've actually, now that you mention it, I've thought about it for a long time. I just never really focused on it a lot. I've been thinking about it for years now. Like, I always said that if, you know, UFOs are real, of course, I've not seen one personally, but I've seen videos of them and it looks pretty believable.
Right.
You know, they're either they're satanic beings, or two, they are, you know, the government trying to mess with people, or they're both. You know, they're both together, you know, doing one or the other.
Yeah.
But the longer and the more, I've heard of a lot of other people talk about it since then too, and I am starting to lean towards more of the spiritual aspect of it, because I've seen, you know, and that's something I haven't talked about with you yet, but in the region where I had the road crossing, I've been out at night and just kind of investigating at night, and I've seen lights, like some people call them orb lights.
Right.
I've seen those. I've even photographed them, or videoed them.
Right.
So I believe that what I was seeing was a spiritual being, to protect the Sasquatch. That's how I translated that.
Right.
But I guess the point is, like, there are spiritual beings and they could morph into different things, I believe. So, like, I mean, sometimes this thing was really bright. Sometimes it was really small. Like, the closer it would get to me personally, it would get smaller.
Right.
But the further away it would be bigger, like the size of an orange. So, like, I don't know if it was real timid when it got close to me. One time, the closest it got to me was like, it was close enough I could hit it, but it really scared me. I was like, I'm not gonna touch that thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So, but yeah, it is. I mean, I guess the reason I'm talking about that is, you know, bringing up the angels and, you know, satanic stuff and UFOs and the ability to do things that we can't do.
Right.
I don't think we can discount any of that stuff.
Right.
And there's definitely a spiritual aspect to all of it.
I agree 100%, Travis. I think that everything's connected and everything comes down to spiritual warfare. You know,
right?
Good versus bad.
Yep.
There's not a whole lot of room for a middleman right now. There's not a lot of gray area left. You know, so it's like time to pick a team. You know what I mean?
Right. You're right about that. Yes. Yeah. 100%.
And, you know, I love that you brought up the lights, because you probably listen to Sasquatch Chronicles, right? Wes Garmer, his podcast. Have you ever listened?
Yeah.
He said, you know,
I started listening to him. Yep.
Yeah, because he was talking about how there's a lot of encounters that have these lights. Either the lights are evident before, during, or after, but it's always you know, he's got more and more reports, and you just added more validity to all that, you know, because we hadn't even mentioned anything like that. It's something that you've experienced. That trips me out, man. I think you're right that it is something spiritual there.
Yeah. Right. So I've heard people, you know, when people are talking on his show, and I started listening to him back when around 2014, after my experience, I got online and started looking around, and I came across this show then. And I think I want to point this out too, because I do it a lot when I'm listening to his show. And, you know, sometimes, you know, because I always try to play in my mind, like, what does it sound like? What does a person sound like? And I know the skeptic will hear them say, well, I listened to a lot of your shows. And so I'm thinking, well, the skeptic's going to say, you've listened to these shows and you know what to say.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so, you know, so that's, you know, so I'm just want to say that doesn't mean that someone hasn't had an experience, because a lot of people are coming to these places to tell their experience and get it off their chest.
Yes.
So I hope that made sense. It probably sounded odd coming out, but
no, that's perfect.
I just wanted to lay that out there, because if somebody has an experience, it doesn't mean that, well, just because they've listened to somebody say it before, they know the right thing to say. No, in my encounter with the light, I did not expect to see that. And I know, I don't even know if I've heard, because I don't think Wes used to talk about it as much. And the more he talked to them, from what I can recall, he had to start talking about it, because he had to start saying the weird stuff. Yeah. You know, with him, it is the same thing with me too. It's like, well, you have this opinion, but it has to change over time because of all the encounters that people are having. You can't stay where you want it to be. It's like, I couldn't stay in my mind, like what I saw was 7 foot tall. You know, it couldn't stay there. I had to broaden my the horizons of my mind. So
hold on a second.
With my light encounter, okay.
Sorry about that. My buddy just showed up at the door. We're good.
Okay, it's all right. Yeah. So with my encounter with the lights, I had been sitting for over an hour before I saw the light. So what I had done is, in this area where I had the road crossing, I saw the road crossing, there was this property that I could go to. And so I had seen some trails, what I thought were trails, through this property that looked like something, you know, fairly large would come through.
Right.
And in Texas, we don't have any elephants or anything like that that would make these trails. And so I was like, okay, you could just almost blur your eyes and see these trails. Like, okay, something doesn't go here, but obviously something comes through here. And so I found a spot, and I was just sitting quiet for over an hour, waiting to see if I could see something cross it. And that's when I saw the light. And the light, it had this flash pattern to it. So it wasn't just like a light. It was a flash. It was like giving a signal. So it flashed twice. It had a brief pause and 3 flashes. So a total of 5. And it did that, and it moved one direction. And as soon as it ended, that right where it ended, it immediately started from where it started from. So it's like it stopped, and then it was already back where it started from. And it did that same pattern going the other direction. And then a few seconds later, it did the same pattern, but it stayed still. Wow. In the same spot. And so after it did that, I heard what sounded like some sort of a vocal, like an owl call, but it didn't sound like an owl. You know what does that make sense? It's like it almost sounded like something mimicking an owl in the forest. So where I was seeing this was in a field area, and there was a forest to my left and one down lower and one to my right. So after that owl call, I heard like a branch snapping down lower in the forest. And so I immediately had my thought was, okay, I'm waiting to see something cross, but something else has warned what I'm waiting to see that I am there.
Yep.
And they responded to each other after the light, you know, kind of cued them in of my presence. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, that really it weirded me out. I did not expect to see a light, but it was so cool at the same time.
Yeah,
I
man.
was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I just saw what I saw. And then after hearing the response from the lights, my thought was I might as well leave because I'm not going to see anything because something's giving them the idea that I'm here. And so that's kind of not fair, right? I've been hiding real still for a long time. And that kind of messed me up there.
You know, this is awesome because I didn't expect, you know, a story like this, and I've never heard it explained in such a way that, you know, I've heard a lot of people talk about lights. I've heard a lot of people talk about, you know, a certain number of taps means a certain number of things and this and that. But I think you got to be spot on, man. This light it's a visual they can have, and it kind of goes out and like a scout to watch out for them, so it can shoot the signal. That's genius. I love that. I think that's, man, you're blowing my mind.
I've seen it work a couple different ways since then too. It hasn't done the flash pattern anymore when I'm around, but it'll do more of a floating through the forest. And it's, man, I've even pulled out a forest FLIR, like a night vision.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, when I did that, the lights went nuts. They came right up close to me. And I think it might have even messed with the actual product of the device.
Really?
It kind of didn't like that. It did not like that. So to me, that just tells me it's a spiritual protection. And I think it goes back to, and I know we've gone a long way from the Giants, or maybe we haven't, but maybe we're kind of still in the same topic. But I think that spiritual aspect has happened a lot to people, whether it's like a flashlight just going dead on them, like the batteries were good, the batteries are all of a sudden not good, and their light stops working. I've had weird stuff too when I've been hiking out where I felt confused. And and it was right after I heard some weird rock tapping and there wasn't anything there, because I went over to look. And I got real confused after that, like, wait, how did I get to where I'm at? And so I really had to pray and get myself out, because I've heard that because I hike alone. Right. I don't really hike with anybody. So
me too.
But I had to pray because I was like, well, maybe the spiritual force is messing with me. Yeah. And so I got my bearings back. But I guess the point is that they definitely do seem to be attached or around the Sasquatch.
Yes.
And I've had them, like I said, sometimes they're bright. I've noticed more recently, if I see it, it's very dim. Almost, and I think when it's like that, I almost catch it on video and not see it with my eye. If I'm looking away, but it'd be real dim. When it's real bright, it seems to be more focused on me and less on them, like to intimidate me.
Yeah.
I've had it come at me and then go through the forest and then fly way up above the canopy of the trees towards me, and then drop, and then all of a sudden it'll be over to the left. It's super fast and weird. I've never been afraid of it really, but too much.
Well, see, that's fascinating.
I respect it. I never go after it.
Right. It's fascinating that, if it looks right at you, that means there's a backside to it. If it's brighter looking at you or focused on you or whatever, Yeah. And it's definitely got some intelligence. If it's moving on in this manner and it's doing these things for a purpose. And the fact that it doesn't scare you. Why do you think that is? You think it's because it's not bad, or because you're a child of God, you're safe?
Yeah, I think you have it right there. That I know that I always pray before I'm around an area like that. And if I feel fear, I pray about it. So I think that's probably, and I think I do, from what I can tell, is I don't know if it's a good or bad spirit. I think it has a job. And I believe its job is to protect the Sasquatch there. And so as long as I'm not doing anything I shouldn't, maybe staying on a trail. I usually just stay put kind of in the area, not hiking around too much.
Right.
Because it's night. But I respect it. You know what I mean? I respect the area. And so I guess that's why I don't feel too much fear. But I'm not saying I don't feel afraid. I mean, there's some level of apprehension or fear, but it's not overwhelming.
Right.
I respect it.
Man.
Never chase after it.
Yeah. Look, hey, there's warnings from old legends that say don't follow the lights in the forest, right?
You're right. Yeah. And I think that's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend not if you see them, don't ever go towards them.
Right.
You can be curious and look at them, but just don't do something stupid.
Right.
And go after it. Oh man.
Well, Travis, is there anything else that we want to hit on that we didn't get to cover? Because it's I get up early in the mornings. I don't want to keep you up too late either.
Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, I think we covered a whole lot of ground.
Yeah.
In regards to giants, prehistoric giants, where they came from the Middle East, the biblical land, spreading all. Actually, I think they spread to every area of the land. I've discovered them in Japan.
Wow.
And I honestly believe that's one reason they built the Great Wall of China. They said these nomadic people were coming through the land. And so if you look at the Great Wall of China, it kind of ends and it kind of forces the inhabitants that were trying to cross the wall in towards the areas of Japan and the Koreas. And I've come across giants buried there. There's megalithic structures there.
I never considered that. That's so cool.
So they went all over. They really went all over, and they might have come to the U.S. from different directions, right? Because there are a lot of them that I find in California, and they're all over the East Coast, the Central. They're all over, really. They've been found in Mexico. They've been found in Canada. I have a count where I think there's like 200 that were discovered in Ontario of prehistoric giants there in mound builders up there.
Wow.
So I guess just to recap, they were a group of culture of mound building culture that just inhabited and went across the whole world, different directions. But they kept that same tradition up until, I believe, around the time of Christ. After Christ, something changed there. And that's where you have a lot of, like, be it the Anasazi, different areas around the world where the civilization just kind of came to a halt. The pre-Inca people, the pre-Aztec people, it just kind of stopped. Then you have these giants that are found in Mexico that are probably linked to the pre-Aztecs. Legend says that fire fell from heaven and killed some of them.
Wow.
So you have all these legends, and I think there's truth to it.
Okay.
So,
wow.
Yeah, but I think we covered a lot of good ground.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. And if you would do me the honors of coming back on again sometime. I know I took us down some rabbit holes, but I will try to stay focused next time.
That's okay, man. Oh, man. I enjoyed it. It was good.
I've absolutely
Good
loved
stuff.
talking to you, Travis. If you don't mind, I'll holler at you on Instagram later. I'll probably have some more questions for you, man, because you're a wealth of knowledge. You're a true expert in this field, and I just really appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate the kind words.
Hey, thank you, buddy. You have a good night.
It was a pleasure to be on with you. Okay, you too. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
God bless.
God bless. Have a good night.
Okay. We'll talk.